All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. How you going, Martyn?
Good morning, Jake. I'm fine. It's a nice warm day here in England. We've had a bit of rain recently, though, which we needed quite badly. But I guess you're now bathed in sunshine, are you, on the Sunshine Coast?
Yeah, mate. Finally, the sun has returned.
We've been on
We've
the
got a bit
beach.
of not yet. I'm hoping to get on the beach this weekend. Every weekend I've been here, it's rained. It's been very unfair. But because we're heading into our winter now, the days are starting to get a little bit shorter, and by the time I get home after work, it's night time, so I can't really go to the beach
No,
with no
no.
sunshine. But yeah, hopefully head down this weekend. Might dip my toe in the water. I assume the water will be a bit cooler than what I'm used to,
Yeah.
but certainly not as cold as what it would be in the UK.
What's happened to your team, by the way? Brisbane Broncos. Gosh, what the hell's
Oh,
going on
mate,
there?
don't get me started on the Broncos at the moment, Martyn. I don't know. I just there's no excuses. They've got Reece Walsh and Ben Hunt on the sideline at the moment, but that's not an excuse. They've still got a really good squad as it is, and I don't know. They just can't seem to figure it out.
Well, the first game of the season, they went to the Roosters and put a cricket score past them. Looked as though it was going to be a fantastic season under Michael Maguire. Round 13, they go to Manly and get hammered. Daly Cherry Evans has a great game for Manly, I thought anyway, and
Mm.
showed that he shouldn't be dropped from the Queensland team for the second Origin game. But the Broncos have fallen out of the top eight. They just seem to be in a crisis situation, don't they?
Yeah, and it's everything we expected and hoped Madge would bring into the side hasn't really translated to on-field performances yet. Um, so I'm not quite sure when they will start to show that grit that Madge's instills in his teams. But yeah, I don't know. I hope in the next few weeks they can figure it out. They'll get Reece Walsh back on the field this week, and hopefully he might be able to add a bit more spark. But yeah, I don't know. I've got no
Well,
answers at the
inevitably there
moment.
are rumours, as there always are. When a side isn't playing well, rumours begin about the relationship between the coach and the leading players. And rumours were swirling around about the Broncos, weren't they? But the players have recently put out a statement denying anything like that and simply saying that they are doing their best and their form will turn in the end, which
Mm,
obviously, as a Broncos supporter, I suppose you hope that that will happen. But
mm.
at the moment, there's no clear sign of it.
That's it. I think maybe fans and I guess the rugby league community, maybe they set the bar too high or set the expectations too high of the Broncos this year. I hope it's like a Cameron Ciraldo sort of situation. When he took over the Bulldogs, they struggled that first season, but then the next year they made the finals. So I'm hoping it might be like a first year sort of situation there where Madge will hopefully be able to turn it around in his second season. But I'm still holding out hope that they can turn it around. There's plenty of time left, but I'm starting to wonder whether I'm the bad luck charm that's brought their downfall since I returned to Australia.
Well, maybe, who knows? But I mean, they're only 2 points outside the top eight. The remarkable thing about the NRL competition this year is that Gold Coast Titans are the bottom team with 10 points, but they're only 4 points behind the top eight. It's so remarkably even, isn't it, around the middle of the table, from the middle to the bottom. I mean, clearly the Bulldogs are quite a way ahead on 22 points, but most of the other teams are very bunched together, and it's a remarkable competition, I think. And interestingly, the Gold Coast, as I say, who are the bottom side, that's who Brisbane play this weekend. So hopefully that's an opportunity for the Broncos to get back on the horse, so to speak, because they need to, don't they? And if they lose at home to the Gold Coast, that will be, the lowest of the low, I suppose, won't it, really?
Mm. And the Titans will be hungry. I'm sure Des Hasler's feeling the heat as well at the Titans there. So,
Well, I think the Titans are a better team than their position suggests, and they've got some really good players in my view. Although I'm not
mm,
quite sure what's happened to David Fafita, but they've still got some very good players, and I think that they could give the they'll push the Broncos all the way. I think it's going to be an interesting game, and hopefully with some great tries.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. Fingers crossed they can turn it around this weekend, but let's hope the Titans don't turn it around against my Broncos. But why don't we get into some of the Super League matches that took place over the weekend, mate?
Do we want to start with last week's State of Origin game, though,
Yeah,
Jake? Because
let's do that.
we didn't discuss that last week. Obviously, last week we had the podcast before the game took place, and again, it was a bad result for you, mate, I'm afraid. 18-6 to New South Wales at Suncorp Stadium, going one up, winning on an enemy territory. I thought
Mm,
the Blues team was absolutely magnificent, personally. And I
mm.
wrote about it in my column, saying that it doesn't bode well for England in this autumn's Ashes series when you see the quality that the Blues had in their team. And I thought they were by far the best team, unfortunately for you.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, mate. It was worrying signs because you look at that Queensland team and you try and think about the possible changes you could make for game two. And really, there's not a lot of players you can bring in to improve that side because I think game two's over in Perth, I believe. So
It is, yes.
it's if it wasn't already an uphill battle for Queensland before game one started, it certainly is now. Um, I think Billy will probably pick a very similar side that he picked to game one. I think the calls have been for Corey Horsburgh to come in from Canberra, who's had a great start to the season. He's an aggressive player, and he will bring
Mm.
um, that sort of mongrel mentality that they need through the middle. But the way the Blues played, like the forward pack just dominated, and then their outside backs just played off the back of that, and just their yardage coming out of their own end with that back three for the Blues was just devastating. And they kept finding their fronts, they kept poking their noses through the tackles and getting quick play the balls, and it just felt like Queensland were on the back foot the whole match.
Yes, they've got a great starting 13, haven't they? From 1 to 13, they're all terrific players, and the combination of Moses and Nathan Cleary at halfback was outstanding. And but as I say, I mean, there's been all this talk about Daly Cherry Evans being replaced for the Maroons, and I'd be amazed if Billy Slater made that move. I think Cherry Evans is a great captain, and I think I would retain him to try and get one back on the Blues in Perth. And it's a new game, and it's a new 80 minutes, and I think Cherry Evans is the sort of player who can rebound, as he's shown many times in his career. So
Mm.
I certainly wouldn't drop him. Obviously, there's a temptation to put Tom Dearden in. I think Tom Dearden's a really great halfback as well, but and I thought he played well off the bench actually for Queensland. But I'd stick with that combination, as you say, possibly bringing in Corey Horsburgh to just give a bit more punch up the middle to Queensland. But I wouldn't go for massive changes if I were Billy Slater.
Yeah, I think they do have to stick with that side. And, maybe Selwyn Cobbo finds himself in the team. That's another name that's been thrown up. But yeah, unfortunately for us, New South Wales just have such a wide-ranging talent pool to
They
pick
do.
from. Uh, and I think if they had to pick the second best player in every position that they have at the moment to play against a Queensland side, that team would do very well as well. There's a lot of
I'm
great
sure they would.
players that missed out. So,
The
yeah.
interesting thing, by the way, is to see now, given that Mal Meninga looks likely to take over the coach's job in Perth for the new Perth club, it looks likely that there's going to be a new Australia coach, doesn't it?
Mm,
And appointed at short notice, really, for this autumn's tour. But you wonder whether Laurie Daly, the New South Wales coach, will be a favourite to take that job. I know Brad Fittler's being mentioned as well, and you think Billy Slater might be a potential candidate too, wouldn't you? But it's going to be interesting to see how that works out, I think.
mm. Do you think it would be okay for an Origin coach to coach at an international level?
I don't know. Has it been done before? I'm not quite sure, really. I can't immediately recall an Origin coach also having responsibility for the Australian team.
Hmm. I'd be okay with it. I know Mal Meninga, he sort of gave up the Queensland job before he took over the Kangaroos. But look, if it was Laurie Daly, I'd be happy with him coaching Australia. I'm sure there wouldn't be any bias. He'd pick the best 17 that he had available.
I'm sure he would. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, most of those guys seem to be Blues guys at the moment, don't they? But
Yeah.
you never know what will ultimately transpire. We've seen plenty of occasions in the past where a team has won the first Origin game and then lost the next two after looking almost invincible. So let's not write Queensland off, Jake.
Yeah, that's right, mate. It needs to be, they need to go over to Perth with a siege mentality and just try and stampede the Blues from the get-go. And then
Absolutely,
I
yeah,
think that's our best chance of winning. But
yeah,
yeah, it'll be a nervous wait for game two, mate, for me. I'm very, very anxious about how this series
yes,
could go.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, we'll head on to Super League now and
yeah,
think back
no,
to what happened over the weekend.
yeah, mate. Well, we'll start on, was it Thursday night? We had Lee defeating Huddersfield 28 points to 24.
Yes, they were well ahead for most of the game, but Huddersfield staged a really spirited comeback uh, with I think it was three late tries to get to within 4 points near the end of the game, and one of those tries was a magnificent try by George Flanagan, the young full-back of Huddersfield Giants, and he looks to me like a potential superstar. I think the Giants have really unearthed a terrific young player in young Flanagan. And the crucial point about this game, Jake, was that the Giants, for the first time this season, had their full spine in operation, which was Flanagan at fullback, who took over from Jacob Gagai. Um, and at halfback, they had Lola here and Adam Clune. And at hooker, they had Zach Wolford, those are I would say, their first choice players now in those positions. And when you can do that, it makes all the difference in the world to the way the team performs. And I think that result, it could so easily have gone Huddersfield's way. Um, and I hope it really injects a whole dose of confidence into that side. Lee were their usual very efficient, combative selves, I think, with this game, and they held on to win. And Lee are now up in fourth place in the table, doing very well, and they're a very good team. But they were given an almighty scare late in the game by the Giants, and as I say, I think it's just a shame that the Giants don't still have the Challenge Cup to aim for this year. The Challenge Cup now is almost a pre-season competition, and at one time it used to come into the season 2/3 of the way through, and I wish it still did, because Huddersfield now can't play for the playoffs. They're too far behind to get into the playoffs, but they could still have a go at the Challenge Cup if it were available to them, which it isn't. And I think that's a failing of the current structure of our league system.
Mm. And for me, watching that performance, Huddersfield, it was promising signs. It's almost like this is the sort of performance we've been waiting for over the past couple of
Absolutely,
months, and
it's
I
certainly the one Luke
feel
Robinson's been
relieved
going
for Luke
for.
Robinson.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah. I feel relieved for him, and I'm sure they'll take a lot out of that performance, mate. But yeah, Lee just keep keep on winning, don't they? They just keep finding a way to win, Lee.
yes, yes. Their big
Mm,
disappointment a few weeks ago was losing the semi-final of the Challenge Cup against Warrington. That was a shock for them, I think. And
mm,
they now obviously have to aim for Old Trafford, and that's going to be a big test for them and for every team to try and beat the favourites OKR and Wigan. At the moment,
mm.
it strongly looks like OKR and Wigan could be having a repeat of last year's grand final at Old
Yeah.
Trafford.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree, mate. Well, let's move on to Friday's matchups, and we'll move on to Hull KR. They defeated the Saints, 34 points to 4, in which was a bit of a step back for the Saints after what we've seen over the past couple of weeks.
absolutely hammered them. Yes, and Jack Welsby's picked up an injury, unfortunately, which won't do Saints much good in the short to medium term. They're probably glad they've not got a game this weekend. Yes, St Helens, after looking as though they were going to bounce back, were back to being inconsistent and poor defensively. And Hull KR just march on. Michael Lewis, absolutely outstanding. Tyrone May, outstanding. Great combination at halfback. Jack Broadbent, I really like to see Jack Broadbent the way he's playing at the moment for Hull KR. They had one or two players missing. They left out Dean Adley, for example, to avoid the danger that he was in of, having an accidental clash and then being suspended from the Challenge Cup final. And Jared Warrior-Hargreaves didn't play either in that game. So it wasn't the full strength Hull KR team that played, but they were still far too strong for St Helens. And again, this game will have brought all the pressure back on Paul Wellens, the St Helens coach. And interestingly, this game showed a change in philosophy for Willie Peters, the Hull KR coach, because 2 years ago, when Hull KR got to the Challenge Cup final against Lee, the week before that game, he played a very weakened side against Wigan and conceded about 60 points. I think, but they still didn't win the Challenge Cup. He rested all those players, but it still didn't work as far as winning the Challenge Cup was concerned. So this year he's done the opposite and more or less played his strongest side, with a couple of exceptions that I've already mentioned. And essentially they've kept up the momentum that they had going into this game and now going into Wembley. So Hull KR are going to go into Wembley. We'll talk about the Challenge Cup final, obviously, in a few minutes. But Hull KR's momentum is just continuing, and they're going to go into the game as the strong favourites against Warrington. So it's going to be a fascinating weekend this weekend. But they were far too strong for Saints, and they remain at the top of the table.
Yeah, their momentum's just snowballing, isn't it?
It is for them, yes.
Yeah,
Everything's just getting better all the time.
yeah, definitely. One of the other matchups we had, mate, Wigan defeating Salford, 46 points to 6. Probably not too surprised by this one.
Well, I think I'd predicted probably 70 points, if I'm honest about it, Jake. So 46-6 was almost a relief. The great thing was that the Salford players did get paid last Friday. That there had been a threat that they might pull out of the game if they weren't paid, but fortunately they were, and they managed to put out a team that as always with them, tried its best. They had one or two young players who I think they've got at least one player making a debut. Let me just check on that to try and remember his name, but. They did their best, but obviously they're still really struggling very badly. And I would love to see Salford. I would love to see somebody getting hold of Salford and sorting the club out. And really, yes, it was a young man called Sam Hill who was a debutant on the wing for Salford, and he came in for quite a bit of praise afterwards from coach Paul Rowley. But Wigan didn't really, I'd sort of said that I hope that Wigan would play a whole load of reserves. They did play some reserves. Young Jacob Douglas on the wing scored a hat-trick for Wigan, which was great for him. A very promising player, incidentally. But, Wigan didn't take their foot off the pedal. And in the circumstances, I think Salford did well to hold them to 46.
No, I agree, mate. Yes, we keep saying it, and we will keep on commending the Salford fans for continuing to show up and support.
Absolutely.
Very loyal fans. In the other matchup on Friday, we had Warrington defeating Castleford 34 points to 24.
Well, Warrington really needed to win that game because they were getting too far away from the top six. And if they'd not won that game, particularly when they're going to Wembley this week, I think the alarm bells would have been ringing. As it stands now, they're only 2 points outside the top six, with St Helens in sixth place on 14 and Warrington 2 points behind them on 12. So they are in touch with the leaders. But more importantly, they needed to win this game for them to have momentum going into Wembley as well. They I don't think they were outstanding, actually, if I'm really honest about it, against Castleford. The Thewlis brothers, incidentally, scored the first two tries. Josh the first and Jake the second. And it's always interesting when you're listing the results in the paper when you've got two players with the same name and the same initial. You've got to the full name, Joe and Jake.
Yeah.
But
We'll blame his parents for that one.
yeah, we'll blame the parents, but they're both really good players. Great to see them both in the same team. I really enjoy watching both of them, and they were just a bit too good for Castleford, and Castleford's revival. Some of us thought that Castleford, if they'd won this game, they'd have only been 2 points behind Warrington, but it never really looked as though they were going to win the game, if we're honest about it, Jake. But I'd say Warrington, it was a pass mark without necessarily being a top mark. But it was Stephen Ratchford's 350th career game, incidentally, and great landmark for him. What a great servant he's been of Warrington. And 350th appearance for Warrington was not the 350th career game, but the 350th appearance for Warrington, which is a great, incredible achievement. And Stephen Ratchford has now moved into standalone 10th place in the list of Super League's all-time leading scorers. So he's scored 1,680 Super League points in a very lengthy career, which is again a remarkable achievement for one of the really great guys in rugby league, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And for them being able to rely on him with the injuries that they've had, what a quality player to bring into your side.
Interesting to see if he plays at Wembley, because last year Sam Burgess left him out of the Wolves side and they went down in a very tame performance against Wigan. And I wonder whether he'll do the same thing again. It'd be interesting, won't it?
I think they'll need someone with his experience at Wembley.
Yeah,
but yeah, we'll see. We'll find out in the coming days what lineup Sam names, and hopefully he'll be there. Moving on to Saturday's matchups, we had Leeds defeating Wakefield 22 points to 18.
Well, that was the game in which we all remembered Rob Burrow, because it's almost a year to the day now since Rob Burrow died last year, the 2nd of June 2024, and this game was played a couple of days before the 2nd of June. And I thought Leeds put on a magnificent show. They involved his family. They involved his great mate Kevin Sinfield in the game, on the event, and so on. And the game itself, I thought, as I wrote in the paper, I thought the game was worthy of the event. It was a very tight match. Wakefield came back brilliantly in the second half they were 22-6 down at half time, but the final score was 22-18. Max Jowett scored a couple of tries for Wakefield, and they weren't quite able to, get draw level in the closing stages of the game. But it was a really enjoyable game to watch, with a crowd of something more than 15,000 people present at Headingley. So it was one of those great Headingley events that Leeds are really good at putting on, and I think great credit to them, and great for us to be able to remember Rob Burrow and everything that he did for Leeds, and the achievements of Rob and Kevin Sinfield and his family for the MND community.
It's crazy to think it's been nearly 12 months already. Where's time
Yeah,
gone?
time flies, doesn't it? Gosh, it really does.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great to see though. They did a good job of that. So, but we'll move on to the final matchup of the round, mate. We had Hull FC defeating Catalans 34 points to nil.
Well, what the hell has happened to Catalans? They sacked their coach, but their results don't improve. They going down at home by such an enormous margin against Hull FC. Hull FC are a good team this year, and they'll win more matches convincingly as well. I'm pretty sure. Will Price scoring 2 tries for them, I think, looks better every week for Hull FC. In my view, I'm still puzzled that Newcastle Knights let him go. If I'm really honest about it, I've said it before, and I'll say it again that Will Price is a great attacking player, and Newcastle Knights in the NRL are not a great attacking side. So how they could afford to not select him for a single game this year, I don't think, seems puzzling to me. But anyway, their loss is definitely Hull FC's gain. He's playing at full back for them and playing outstandingly well. And Aidan Caesar again, another brilliant signing for Hull FC, leading them around the park and just generally embarrassing the Catalans Dragons. The Catalans recruitment this year has been, well, it hasn't worked, has it, so far?
Mm.
And I'm afraid they're getting to the point now where if they're not careful, they're going to be left behind with no chance of getting into the top six. I mean, they might think already that they don't have a chance of getting into the top six, but it's looking very disappointing for them. And they've been linked with Sean Wayne as the new coach. That seems to have gone a bit quiet recently, which might mean that there are negotiations taking place behind the scenes, or it might mean that they've approached Sean and he's said no. So we're not quite sure about that. But they need somebody to go in there to toughen them up and to get them firing again. And if it's not Sean, I'm not quite sure who that's going to be.
Mm. Yeah, they've certainly been one of the more disappointing teams this year in terms of their team on paper. We had big expectations for them this season.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
just seems like they've played well below the standard we thought they were capable of.
There's no doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about
Mm.
it. And it's been gradually getting worse since the season started. That's the thing. It's not just that they've not been playing well, but but they've been on a downward curve, not an upward curve. We talked earlier about Huddersfield perhaps now starting to get better. Well, unfortunately, the Catalans don't look as though they are going to get better, at least as they've been playing recently.
Mm. And just I was watching, I think it was Will Price's second try because both were great individual efforts, but
Mm.
it was almost like he scooped up like a rolling ball and he started his break, but there just seemed like there was no urgency from any of the Catalans defenders to
No, no,
try and shut him down. And
no.
just those little things where like, yeah, it just seems like those little one percenters, there was no
Not
effort there.
focused. Not focused. Not focused on doing everything they could to win the game. It's as
Yeah,
though
no, it's
something's just gone wrong. They've lost their coach, and they seem to have lost their motivation, don't they?
yeah, going through the motions a little bit, I think.
Mm.
But anyway, mate, let's touch on a few things you wrote about in your column this week. We've already spoken about a few of them, but Betfred, they seem to they've released the Challenge Cup odds. Hull KR, strong favourites. Do you think we could see an upset this weekend from Warrington?
Well, I was thinking. I mean, that there have been there's a history of upsets in Challenge Cup finals. I mean, most Challenge Cup finals go to the favourite, whoever the favourites happen to be, and clearly that is Hull KR this year. But there have been plenty of upsets. Obviously, the biggest one was in 1998 when Sheffield Eagles beat Wigan, but that's not the only time. Hull FC beat Leeds in 2005. That was quite an upset, and even you know Warrington themselves beating St Helens in 2019. That was quite a big upset as well. Very disappointing for St Helens fans. That one was, and the year before that, we were just talking about the Catalan Dragons. in 2018, the Dragons beat Warrington at Wembley, which was also a shock. I remember Tony Gigo winning the Landstod Trophy for the Catalans Dragons with an outstanding performance, the best performance of his career. So if Warrington are going to win this weekend, they'll need one or two players giving something close to career best performances. But of course, the big thing for them is that George Williams is going to come back into the side after being out for 7 weeks with an ankle injury and having had an operation to cure that. He's coming back before the recommended time for his return. So it's a bit of a risk in terms of whether he can actually get through the game unscathed. But obviously, Warrington and Sam Burgess, they believe it's worth the risk, as does George Williams himself. He's made that absolutely clear. So, and if it works for them, it's going to be terrific. If I was Sam Burgess, I would select George Williams and Stefan Ratchford as the halfback combination to face the Robins. I think that combination of Williams' brilliant running game and short kicking game, and Stefan Ratchford's experience and ability to read the game, which is so strong on his part, I think that would be a genuine threat to Hull KR. And if they can get all the rest of their team, they're going to be missing Danny Walker at hooker, of course, but if they can get the rest of their team firing, I think we could see a really exciting game, actually, Jake. And I don't think it's going to be. I mean, I think Hull KR will win, but I don't think it's going to be a one-sided game necessarily. I think it could be a close game. And interestingly enough, when we talk about injured players coming back, Hull KR will have Michael McIlorum in their squad. Michael McIlorum suffered a bicep injury, had surgery on that. It's a muscle injury, and he's coming back, I think, also after about 7 or 8 weeks, when the normal period for remediation would be about 12 weeks. So that's going to be, if they play Michael McIlorum, which is by no means certain. I obviously don't know what the team's going to be. That won't be announced until the day of the game. But it would be a massive risk to play Michael McIlorum, and Willie Peters may decide it's worth the risk, because I mean, he is a great player. There's no doubt about it, and he brings an awful lot. McIlorum normally starts the game when he's available, and Jez Litton comes off the bench, which is a great combination. Works brilliantly for them, and obviously they'd like to do that again. But I would give a bit of a warning that there are plenty of examples in Challenge Cup finals in years gone by of players rushed back into action to play in the Challenge Cup final, rushed back from injury, and it turning out that really they were rushed back far too quickly. I'll go back to 1979 when Bill Ashurst was rushed back into action for Wakefield Trinity for the game against Widnes. And he limped through the game. He could hardly walk through the game. It was ridiculous, really, to see them doing that. Then again in 1986, what was his name? Gavin, the guy who played for Hull KR. When Hull KR lost to Castleford. Gosh, I've forgotten his second name now. But Gavin Newsom, he limped through the game and was ineffective for most of it. In 2005, Leeds brought back the great centre Keith Senior from an ankle injury, and again he went off at half time. He clearly wasn't up to the job on the day, and Leeds lost that game. So there are lots of examples of teams playing injured players at Wembley and living to regret it. So I'd be very careful if I were Hull KR, only if they're absolutely positive that there will be no reaction if they play McIlorum, would I actually put him in the side.
Yeah, because obviously, they're going to need him come the end of the year as well. They've just got to
And they've been
prioritise
playing
what's
well
more
without him.
important.
They've been playing well
Mm,
without him. It's not as though they've not been playing well when he's not been in the side. So
mm,
I think it would be an odd decision. But again, I'm not the coach, and I've not got the inside story of how well he has recovered. He might have recovered, outstandingly well, and he may be perfectly capable of getting through the game. I'm not in a position to make that judgment, but I'd just be a bit cautious about it. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, yeah, no, I agree, mate. Um, let's talk crowd attendance predictions. What do you think
Probably
the
about
crowd
sixty
figure will
thousand, I
be?
think. I'm not sure how many Warrington are going to take. We actually spoke at the weekend to Carl Fitzpatrick, the Warrington chief exec, who thinks they might take up to 12,000 fans with them. I hope they do. I think OKR will exceed that figure, but I don't think the crowd will be much beyond 60,000. The I think the RFL have been hoping that Oldham and Bradford would contest the 1895 Cup final, but in fact
Mm,
it's now York and Featherstone who won't take the same sort of crowd support that Oldham and Bradford would have done. So I think we'll be just about breaking 60,000. I hope it's more than that, significantly more. Last year it was 65,000, and as I say, I don't think the Challenge Cup final should be held at this time of the year. Personally, I prefer it later in the season, as I've written several times. But we'll see. I'm sure it's going to be a great game. That's the thing. It's a game that deserves a full house. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I'd love to see 90,000 people there, but it seems that the days when we used to get crowds like that at Challenge Cup finals are long behind us. And I hope that whatever the strategic review group do that are thinking about the game at the moment, that they find a way to get us back to those sorts of figures, because the
mm.
game deserves it. We just it's going to be a great game, and it deserves to have a full house there. I hate to see the big gaps in the crowd at Wembley.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, mate. Some of the other things you wrote about, mate, we've probably already touched on a little bit, but in terms of the Perth Bears job, we suspect Mal Meninga is going to get that one.
It
Do you
looks
think?
like Mal Meninga. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think Brad Arthur's a bit unlucky to miss out? For me personally, I think I'd be going with someone who's currently coaching, you know, in either
So would I.
hemisphere. Mal's been out of the game a long time, but obviously he brings that aura with him.
It has
Um,
been a great aura. It'd be, I mean, maybe a director of rugby he ought to be, with a guy actually doing the coaching on the field. That would be a better option, I think. Mal hasn't coached a club team since the early 2000s when he was at Canberra. And coaching a club team is very different from coaching an Australian national team, as we obviously know. So, I'm surprised that he has been pushed forward so much for this job. But maybe they think that having a big name guy there will do the trick in terms of generating publicity for the new club. Who knows? I'm not quite sure what their thinking is.
mm. And along with that, I guess that means Sam Burgess also misses out. I know he
Yes,
was
I think
linked with
so.
that
Yeah,
job.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Uh,
Sam's been more or less quoted over here as saying that he recognises that he's missed out, but he's sure that Mal Meninga will do a great job, which I obviously hope he does.
mm. And I guess the flip side of that, positive news for Leeds fans, if it means that Brad Arthur's going to hang around for another couple of seasons, fingers
Well,
crossed.
yes, although he's also been linked to the Gold Coast Titans if
Mm,
if the current situation doesn't improve at the Titans. So you never know, do you? Brad obviously wants to go back to Australia, and he's made that absolutely clear. He puts family first, and you can't blame him for doing that, can you? His two sons are both playing in the NRL now. He'd like to be on hand to see them and cheer them on, ideally while coaching a club in the NRL at the same time. He's clearly got
mm,
the ability to do that. So it's a difficult decision for him because Leeds will be offering him an extension. But from Leeds' point of view, I'm sure they would like to offer him a 2 or 3 year extension to give them some long term stability in the club rather than just a year's extension. But given the way that Brad talks about his desire to return home, I doubt whether he'd want to sign a deal for more than another year. So you never know. I mean, as I say, I've not spoken in detail to him about this. It's very much an issue for him and the way he thinks about it and what he thinks is best for him and his family and so on. So, you can't blame him whatever decision he makes. But from Leeds' point of view, I think he's doing a very good job with them. And it could even end up at Old Trafford this year, couldn't it? The way that they're playing at the moment, I wouldn't. They're third in the league. I wouldn't rule Old Trafford out if I were a Leeds supporter. And if they do get there, then clearly there's even more onus for them to keep him on board for next year.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Now, have you been reading the news and hearing the whispers surrounding Tom Trbojevic potentially keeping Super League open as an option?
Well, I'm not completely familiar with that story, but I'm not that surprised about it. But again, Tom is an absolutely great player. I think Tom is one of the most able players in the NRL, but his problem is that he does seem to get a lot of injuries. He's a high risk recruit, isn't he? In that
Mm.
sense, he gets trouble with his hamstrings and trouble in various other ways too. Um, so you'd be signing a great player, probably putting him on a marquee contract, but would he be able to complete the season? That would be the issue if you were going to
Mm.
sign a player like him. And you'd have to weigh up the risks, wouldn't you, if you were a British club? And is the sort of player who Catalans might sign, but then they find that he misses half the season for them. So who knows? And I'd love to see him have a full season without any injury problems whatsoever. And if he did do that, he'd be sensational, whether he's
Mm.
playing in the NRL or Super League.
Yeah, I just always think back to that 2021 season where he was injured, came back halfway through the year and still won Dally M, one of the
Yeah, yeah,
greatest individual runs we've seen in a very long time.
absolutely.
Um, but yeah, that's just, yeah, if he could string together a full season, I'm sure he's still got all the ability, but it's just his body that lets him down, which is quite sad.
Mm.
But in other signing news, mate, Ryan Hall, he's signed another year extension with Leeds, which will take him through his 20th season, I believe.
It's going to be the first player who tries to play till he's 90 years old, I think, is Ryan. He's the second oldest player in Super League at the moment after Chris Hill at
Yeah.
Salford. But he's showing no signs of, of tiring. And he's an incredible record breaker, isn't he? And he's just going to go on doing it, it seems. And marvellous for him. He's a great ambassador for rugby league. He ought to be, in my view, given a much higher profile in terms of commenting on the game, because whenever you see him either on Sky or the BBC being interviewed by the presenters, he comes across incredibly well. Highly intelligent young guy. Well, not that young anymore, of course. He's in his late 30s now. But although I wish I were as well, actually, I wouldn't mind being that age myself. But brilliant, absolutely brilliant guy in many different respects. And I think he's got, if he wants it, he's got a future career in the media. And um, but I hope it doesn't come about for quite a few years yet, and that he manages to keep playing until he's 40 years old, hopefully.
Or he's still in great form and scoring all those important tries when they need him to. So
Mm,
there's certainly no negatives to having someone around the club with his experience and that ability
no,
to be able to mentor the young players. You can't put a price on that.
no, not at all. No, no, he's absolutely outstanding, and he's part of the Leeds furniture, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. The other news from over this side of the world, mate, Lachlan Galvin, it's official. He's signed with the Bulldogs, effective immediately.
Yes, there was
Probably no real surprises there.
quite a lot of talk about the fact that Phil Gould said a few weeks ago that the Bulldogs weren't interested in signing him, and then a few weeks later they do sign him. and that's
Mm.
a typical Phil Gould thing, isn't it? You pretend not to be interested in somebody, and then furtively behind the scenes you actually negotiate with them and get them signed up. And but it's going to be really interesting though at the Bulldogs, isn't it? Because they've got Matt Burton at standoff, who's
Mm.
also an Origin standard player. So, and they've got Sexton at halfback. So where are they going to play Lachlan Galvin? That's an interesting question, I think, because I mean Galvin's got to be played somewhere. So where will it be? Will it be at lock forward, lock forward as you call it? Um,
Mm.
I'm not sure that he carries enough weight to play in that position, if I'm really honest about it. So uh, obviously Cameron Serraldo is a very smart coach, so he will presumably already know what the answer is to this question. But I'll be fascinated to see it when he actually turns out for them.
Mm. It's one of those ones too where they're going so well this year. They really want to disrupt the lineups that they've been putting out, and adding a player like him into the mix could completely throw out their attack.
Mm.
Whether you look at maybe bringing him off the bench, I know a lot of pundits have said that he has to earn his stripes and perhaps start him in New South Wales Cup for the first few weeks and then look at bringing him in. But
Oh, he's
yeah,
too good
I'm
for
not
that. I
sure.
mean, he's a really great young player. He's potentially an Australian, international for many years ahead. Is Galvin, and to give him an extended run in the New South Wales Cup would be ridiculous in my view, and would just be inviting the possibility of him getting injured and who knows what. So no, I would play him in the first team as I say. I'm just not quite sure where he'll end up at the moment, but he's too good not to be in
Mm,
the first team.
yeah, no, I agree. Did you see the heated exchange between the Nine reporter Michael Chambers and Phil Gould on 100% footy? He really ripped into Gus. Um,
Yes, yes.
and it got a little bit, it almost got a little bit personal. And Gus, one of his responses was, no other club official has to come in here and answer these questions. But it's like, but Gus, you get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to be a Channel 9 media pundit. I think I commend the reporter Michael Chambers for standing up to him
Oh,
and really
yes.
testing him.
Yes, yes. I
It
couldn't
made
agree
for
more.
great television.
Yeah, I couldn't
Um,
agree more. We need more of that sort of thing. I think that was
yeah,
it was outstanding and well done, Michael Chamas. And let's have a bit more of it now. And it doesn't do Phil Gould any harm. If you're going to be uh, questioned rigorously in that sort of way, I think it's good for both the interviewer and the interviewee. So,
mm,
as you say, great television, and it gets more eyeballs on, another aspect of rugby league as far as I'm concerned. So well done
mm.
to Michael.
I just wonder what the producers were saying. Do you think they were getting ready to intervene, or do you think they were saying, "No, let this play out. This is great. The ratings are
No, let it play out.
peaking."
And if it came to fisticuffs, that would be even better television, wouldn't it? So let's face it.
uh, Absolutely, mate. No, I really
Yeah,
enjoyed that. I wonder what
yeah.
the mood was like in the green room afterwards. I wonder if they were on talking terms yet.
Who knows?
Um, but mate, why don't we take a look at this weekend's Wembley predictions? When we start with the women's match, we've got St Helens taking on Wigan. Who do you think will win this one, mate?
Oh, I think Wigan might shock Saints in this game because
Yeah.
Wigan are the coming team in women's rugby league in this country. We used to have a big three of Saints, Leeds, and York, and now Wigan have joined that group, and not just joined it, but they're starting to overtake their rivals. Wigan is a club that doesn't like to be second best for any length of time, and they've got some very good players. I think they will give us a great game. I'm going to be down at Wembley for that game. I'm going down specifically quite early, actually on Saturday morning, so I can get there in time to see the whole of the women's game. And I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a cracker. And I hope plenty of Wigan and Saints fans go down to support their respective teams as well.
Yeah. Imagine if they can add that bit of silverware to the Wigan trophy cabinet. they'll be running out of
Oh,
room.
they'll be keen to do it. Dennis Betts, the Wigan coach, will be really keen to do it. I think the rivalry between those two clubs will be something to see on Saturday. And I'm so glad actually, Jake, that the two women's finalists are two quite different clubs from the two men's finalists. We've got 6 different clubs at Wembley this Saturday, and I think it's great to see that the clubs are quite different for each game. So it gives a
Mm.
different flavour to each game.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Well, we'll go to the 1895 Cup now. Featherstone versus York. Who do you like in this one?
Well, I think York have been on great form actually recently, and I think they might just be too strong for Featherstone. They had a difficult start to the season, did York, but under Mark Applegarth, their coach, former Wakefield Trinity coach, I think he's a really good coach, if I'm really honest about it. And I think they'll probably have a little bit too much for Featherstone. Just looking at where they are in the table. York are 4th, Featherstone are 8th, and York have been on a great streak of results. So I just think that it's another game that'll be worth seeing. But and York have been there before, but haven't won the 1895 Cup. Featherstone have been there and they have won it in the past. But I think it'd be great to see York winning it this year, and I think they will do. And they might just have a bit too much for the Featherstone boys.
And have they still scheduled that match after the Challenge Cup
Yes,
final?
it's after the main game. Yeah,
Yeah.
which isn't
Baffles me
isn't
why
great.
they do that.
Sorry.
It baffles me why they do that.
Well, I think it's because they want the Challenge Cup final on at the prime time for television in the afternoon, and the Challenge Cup final kicks off. I think is it 3 o'clock or 2:30. I'm not quite so sure actually. Just looking at it. Um, yes, it kicks off at 3 o'clock. There's the Challenge Cup final, and the 1895 Cup kicks off at 17:45, quarter to 6, in other words. And I don't think many Hull KR and Warrington fans will stay behind for that game, unfortunately. So it will be played in
Mm.
front of pretty empty stands, which is highly regrettable, unfortunately. It should be played ideally before the Challenge Cup
Mm.
final.
And we'll move on to the Challenge Cup final, mate. Hull KR versus Warrington. Who do you think takes this one out?
Well, we've talked about it quite a lot already. I think Hull KR will win, but not by the margins that some people seem to suggest. I think it could be probably below 10 points in the end. I think Warrington have got so many strike players, particularly when Williams comes back into the side. You've got Matt Duffy at fullback who combines so well with him. They've got very fast wingers. Obviously, they're missing Matty Ashton, but the Thewlis brothers, if they both play, are both potentially very dangerous players. So they've got plenty of strike. We're not sure whether Toby King is going to come back to play in the centre for Warrington. But if he does, I think Warrington are going to look quite strong in the backs, and it's then just a question of whether their forwards can handle the OKR forwards, which they ought to be able to do. They've got
Mm.
a strong pack. They're expecting Lachlan Fitzgibbon back in the pack as well, I believe. So I think they'll certainly give Hull KR a game and plenty to think about. But I think the Hull KR's flair with Michael Lewis and Tyrone May and some of the other players who are, Jez Litton. I've got a real great admiration for Jez Litton at hooker, and I actually hope that they start the game with him and don't bring Michael McIlorum back because, as I say, I think McIlorum's too big a risk personally, as I've said earlier. But nonetheless, I think Hull KR could just have a little bit too much commitment and a bit too much just rugby league nous, really, for the Warrington side.
Mm. If you had to pick a player of the match, an early prediction, who would it be?
Well, it's got to be Michael Lewis, I think. If OKR win, I think it'll be Michael Lewis. If Warrington win, it'll be George Williams.
Yeah.
I think it's between those two. I don't think many of the players you would consider really in the for that particular individual honour.
Yeah. All right, mate. Well, we're just about done for today's episode. Is there any talking points I've missed or anything else you'd like to mention before we get out of here
I
today,
think
mate?
we've mentioned most of the current issues, Jake. There'll be a lot to talk about next week, no doubt, when we're reflecting on the game. But
Yeah.
and we'll no doubt be looking ahead to the next State of Origin game in the next
Mm.
podcast. But no, I think we've been talking now for almost an hour, mate, and
Mm.
we'd better get on with some work, hadn't we? I should think.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Well, I've got to go eat some dinner soon, mate. My work day is
well,
done.
it's
So,
what time is it where you are at the moment?
we're just on 7
Ten
p.m.
past
So,
seven. So it's still early in the
yeah,
evening. Yeah. Has it
yeah,
gone
still
down
early
yet?
in the Yeah, so I think the sun's going down at about 5:30 p.m. at the moment.
Hmm.
We're in the first month of winter officially. So, but winter around here at the moment it's like 18 degrees, 19 degrees. So not
Yeah.
to rub it in.
Yeah. 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 Can you see
But
the
every
beach
time
where you are?
not where I am. It's not too far away. It's probably a 5-minute drive from
Yeah.
where I'm staying. So I'm just in temporary accommodation at the moment. I'm moving into a rental on Monday, so we're really excited to move into that and
Yeah.
unload all our stuff out of our suitcases. But yeah, it's been a long wait. Can't wait to settle down.
Are you missing Manchester though?
I am a little bit, to be honest. Missing Manchester, missing all the friends we made while we were over there. But yeah, at the same time, loving being back as well and catching up with old friends and family. So I think I'll enjoy it a lot more here now that it's stopped raining. But yeah, I'll
Yeah.
report back to you next week if we can get a weekend full of sunshine.
Yeah. 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 Okay, mate. Well,
Mm.
have a great one, and be careful if you go swimming in the sea.
Oh, mate, I'll keep an eye out for sharks. But anyway,
Sometimes.
we'll have this one go out very shortly. We'll hopefully have it posted this afternoon, mate. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll do it all again next week, hey, Martyn?
Yeah. Thanks, Jake. Speak to you soon.